Hello, my spooky darlings. So, I told you guys in the one that was prior to this that I was feeling like doing some movie reviews. When I say that, I don't mean in the sense that I'm going to break down the whole film for you. Uh, I'm going to go ahead and just do one for you so that you understand what I'm talking about. Actually, I'll do two. Just because I feel like since it is October, it is definitely a time where I can go ahead and talk about more um, abnormal type of horror movies for you. I got two. So the first one I'm going to talk about is Tusk. What that film is it's a Kevin Smith film. If you've ever seen anything by Kevin Smith, aka Silent Bob. Alright, now if you know his films, he's more of a comedian type of storyteller with a lot of his movies. Such as Jay and Silent Bob, Jay and Silent Bob Strikes Back. He did Dogma. He also did Red State, which is another horror movie that he did. Yeah, that's another one, go check out. I might do that one later, but it's definitely one that he went hardcore into horror with that one. And you know what? Kudos on him, because horror is not a genre that's very easy to do. There's several different types of horror, and in that one, it is a lot like 28 Days Later in the sense that it is a zombie style flick. But go watch it, guys, because it puts a new trope to the idea of a zombie style film. Because it's not really zombies, it's a virus. But go watch it, it's worth it. Now, Tusk. This movie is about a young man played by Justin Long. Great actor. Oh, love him. He is, best way to put it, he is just a lost soul in many aspects. He meets a gentleman that throws his world upside down and changes so much that, like, it's just insane. So basically he gets, spoilers, he gets kidnapped by this gentleman and put through some of the most grotesque body horror that is rivaling to The Fly, if you've ever seen that. This gentleman goes through a very big body change. The film's titled Tusk because the gentleman that kidnapped him when he was younger was saved by a walrus. A walrus, yeah, I know. So this gentleman has gone through his entire life trying to honor said walrus by making a human walrus. I think you can guess where this is going to go. So basically, again, spoilers, he drugs Justin's character. And it's one of those films that the level of horror that go through your mind as you watch this gentleman go from an everyday person into this grotesque creature. Like, it's got horror in it that's gonna shake you. It's not like a Serbian film where it's just grotesque for the sake of grotesque. And if you don't know what that one is, that's one of those films that most people say is so out there with what it's doing that it's almost on the level of a slaughter. Not just a slaughter film, but it's actually like, I don't know how to put it where it's not going to sound like it's just perverted, but there's a lot of stuff in a Serbian film that pushes the limits, and it's purposeful. It's done by the director to show you just how insane certain things can be, and is a good film. Go check that one out too. But with Tusk, it is essentially just one of these films where you have to sit and watch the horror of what it would be like to be taken by somebody and put through such horrors that it's going to emotionally physically and irreversibly scar you in so many ways that no matter how much you try to be a normal person again, you're never going to be there. Just so I don't make it so you don't watch the film at all because I tell you everything. At one point, there is a moment where you come to find out the man has taken off Justin's character's legs and taking the thigh bones, shaped them into tusks, and surgically implanted them to the sides of his face. He's also taken large amounts of his body and shaped him into more of a walrus body. There is amazing, in my opinion, fighting scenes for underwater in that film. A lot of underwater, scenes tend to get super blurry because of the factor it is underwater, that it's so hard to keep track of what you're watching. This isn't one of those. This one, you're going to be on the edge of your seat and just the whole time terrified for the fact that even if Justin's character gets out of this, even if he survives it, he's never gonna be the same. There's nothing that they can do to make him be the same person he was before. Now, the other film I wanted to talk about, now this one's gonna be a little bit, I don't actually remember the director or any of the actors. It was one of those films that are kind of a one and done type of directing film. I don't know if this director has done anything else besides it or prior to it. It was just one of these films that I was shown myself that stuck with me, and it's called Poltergeist. Poultrygeist. Yes, like chicken. Why that's kind of funny is because it is a zombie alien type of film. This young man, he works at a fast food joint. And now anybody who works at a fast food joint, you can kind of understand the pains of just working there to begin with. Well, his girlfriend isn't exactly being the best girlfriend. She won't be physical with him in any aspect, and he gets where it's starting to take its toll on him. So he ends up talking to her about it, and she basically ends up breaking up with him, which kind of starts off the whole thing, where he's just kind of down on himself in the very beginning of the film immensely because of it, and he's not really paying attention to other stuff that's going on around him. Well, it's mostly, this film is playing on the ideas of how big companies like fast food places don't necessarily always pay attention to their products properly because they're just trying to make that dollar. The owner of the franchise comes in there and he gets where he has eggs that are kind of discounted, and he got them on a massively good, price, right? Well, I think the way that they put it was that they're radioactive, but it's more like aliens because people who start eating said product and they start putting it on everything, including like their burgers and stuff. And I don't get that. I don't get egg on a burger. Anybody who likes egg on a burger, good for you. Not my type of style. Anybody that consumes this product, and it gets into like everything, because at one point somebody's infected and they have a pustule that goes into the food in the deep fryer. Like this it's one of those films that like goes grotesque in its aspects of trying to get its point across, like a lot of horror does, but it's so comedically comical the entire time that you just can't hate it, because even though it's got horror tropes and all kinds of stuff that's making fun of being the fact that it's a comical horror movie, it's just too hilarious not to laugh at. One of my favorite parts, and spoilers on this moment, so if you don't want to know, skip past it. There is a moment where a gentleman who is very large, and I don't mean to any disrespect on anybody who is, overweight or oversized. This man is probably 3 normal-sized men, and he eats one of the infected products. And when he does, he ends up having an infant. Again, if any of you have worked in a fast food joint, this is one of your nightmares that when I tell you, you're just going to get chills down your spine, because I'm sure if you aren't a manager, and if you were before Like, if you weren't a manager, or you aren't a manager, and everybody doesn't start off as a manager, so you're gonna have this anyways. This man goes into the bathroom, and he has where he has such a large bowel movement, he literally shats himself out into an egg. And it's one of those scenes that's just, oh, when you watch it, it's so guttural and so just like unappealing but hilarious all at the same time. And I guess maybe I have a dark sense of humor because I find darker stuff creepy. Most people would find creepy, I find hilarious. But yeah, he literally shits himself out in an egg form. Like, and then it hatches, and he's just one of these creatures. And there's this hilarious scene where everybody's turning into these creatures. And one of my other favorite parts is a guy gets his face shoved into the deep fryer, and then the creature bites into his face, like after he's deep fried him. Another one gets his face stuck onto a flat top grill, and like they start chopping into his head, and like there's brains, and like it's so just, it's brutal and it's glorious for that. But films like that tend to stick with me a little bit more, that are playing on tropes of horror. Like, I personally love Cabin in the Woods for all of its tropes that it does, and like that's another glorious film that you guys can check out and see. Personally, on my own like scaling of films, Tusk is definitely, Mika, really? My cat's a little shit, I'm sorry. I have it up on a ledge and she decided to walk in front of it. Yeah, so on my personal scale, when it comes to the film Tusk, I would give that probably a 6 out of 10. Only for the factor that it doesn't have as much story, in my opinion, as it could have to explain why this gentleman is so hell-bent on turning people into walruses. It just gives a story that he got saved by one when he was younger, and that's it. So in my opinion, I love Kevin Smith, but it's definitely not one of my top films. Now, when it comes to Poltergeist, I give that a 7, only for the factor that it doesn't play on itself of being a serious film. It does play a lot on its comical side, and never tries to act like it's one of those Hollywood overly done horror films like you see with a lot of zombie films. Why I say that is because, don't get me wrong, I love George A. Romero. I love everything he's done, even the ones that are a little bit suckier than others. Like Zombieland is, in my opinion, a better structured film, even though it's more of a comical film, than, say, like the remake of Dawn of the Dead. That one tried way too hard, in my opinion, to be a serious horror films, but then it literally has a moment with a pregnant lady where the baby is a zombie. Don't do zombie babies, okay, guys? Like, zombie babies to me are comical, okay? It's like when you watch... Okay, there's going to be 2 names for this. I know in other countries it's called Brain Dead, or Dead Alive is what you know it as in the States. The zombie baby in that, it's just too funny for me to take seriously. There's a moment where he kicks it across a field, and there's other moments where it bursts through a head of a person. If you haven't seen Dead Alive, that movie is something to go see. There's over 50,000 gallons of blood in the one rebirth scene. Yes, rebirth. Giant mama tries to suck him back in. How am I supposed to take that seriously? Can't. But that one tries to play on being comical in the same aspect of being real horror. And that's not, no. I think that's personally why a lot of films that get redone never are gonna do as well as their original predecessors, just because in some films the idea of that horror was not done a million times when it was done. Like, for example, what I said with Dawn of the Dead. Um, Dawn of the Dead, when it was first put out, there wasn't very many zombie films at the same time. It was like one of those, oh my gosh, this could be real kind of moments. And when you go to redo something like that and you just play on the factor that you have zombies and that's your big story arc, it's not going to be as good as a story that gives a great background, has fantastic actors. And don't get me wrong, there are a lot of horror films that fall flat on their face because the acting is terrible. Absolutely terrible. Good example, House of Wax. That film, the remake has such a budget, but when you take into account you have terrible acting by some people in it, not to name names, I know a lot of you are going to look at Paris Hilton and be like, your fault, but she kind of was playing the character that she was suited for. I mean, she was a spacey kind of person who was more interested in the things in her life than what was going on around her, which is why she, got a pipe to the head. Oh, spoiler on that then. Sorry guys. A lot of mine are going to be spoilery. Truth is if you don't want that, I guess I could start doing where I skip ahead where you don't see the parts and let you know timeline-wise. But in all honesty, if you're looking at my reviews, I'm not here to give you films that are brand new or films that haven't been out for a hot minute where you could have seen them. I also don't like a lot of modern horror. I tend to like older films. Like my list of the top movies that you should see for Halloween, if you notice, none of them are from the last 5 years. That's purposeful. I feel as though a lot of horror in today has where they think they have a standard they have to follow, and if they don't follow it, it's not gonna do well. I love films that take a risk. I love films that do something that's different. I love films that take complete different turns and places with how they are going to do their structuring. Like The Color of Outer Space. I don't know why that one didn't do as well as it should have, in my personal opinion. I think it has a lot to do with the fact it was a Lovecraftian style film, and if you've ever seen any kind of Lovecraftian stories at all, there's a couple that you can check out, like Reanimator, Beyond Reanimation, Bride of Reanimator. Not in that order, because they don't go that way, but when you watch them, you'll understand what I mean. There are films that weren't seen as good in people's opinions as those who actually have read some Lovecraftian books. There's other ones that you can, watch too that I can't remember all their names of them, but there's been quite a few Lovecraftian films too. But The Color of Space, personally the reason I think that it didn't do as well is because they didn't give really an explanation as to what these, things were that were coming after them. And then they had some very grotesque body horror with the mother and the son moment that you see in the film. There's some other stuff in there that's pretty hard to deal with too. But I mean, if you're anything like myself, I tend to like slasher films and more gore than a comedic version of horror. There's really good comedic horrors, don't get me wrong. But in all actuality, if you're going to go with horror, I tend to like the idea that you're going to try to actually terrify me. And jump scares are not something that do that for me. I think it's just because it's been overplayed too much in our modern cinema. I don't get terrified when some little girl that's dead pops out in front of me as much as if you were to have me stumble upon her, oh, say, like, grave, and you unearth it and have it right in your face. Like, that's a lot more terrifying. Like, to me, Poltergeist, that film, which is playing on the name of Poltergeist that I told you guys before, it's playing on that trope. That's why it's hilarious at the name. Poltergeist, if you notice in the film, they don't try to do as many jump scares. In that one, it's more like the moment when she falls into the pool. And if you haven't seen this film, what are you doing watching horror without watching some of the, classics? No offense to anybody who hasn't, but go get on that. That's an important one to watch, man. But it basically has a moment where the mother falls into the pool. And she gets a bunch of skeletons coming at her. So I just think that if you're going to do horror, do it right. So go check out some of those films, guys. I hope that you've had some fun listening to me and my reviews on some films and some ideas for you to watch for October. I love you guys. See you in the next one.